The Cultural Mosaic of Canada. The people of Canada have taken great pride in the fact that their country is a cultural mosaic. This image here will show you what a mosaic looks like. As you can see, it's a picture, but it's made up of lots of individual pieces that come together to build a picture. So in Canada, lots of different uh, ethnic groups come together to build what is Canada. The United States has often been described as a melting pot. This concept means that people from all around the world came to the United States and became Americans, creating a new ethnic group out of the combined elements in the population. Canadians describe their nation as a cultural mosaic. This concept takes into account the people who have moved to Canada from all over the world. They have maintained many of their cultural ties with their former lands, and yet they are Canadians. For example, there are French Canadians, Ukrainian Canadians, Italian Canadians, Chinese Canadians, or English Canadians. Small pockets of these various groups can be found all across the country. A glance across the Canadian mosaic reveals a variety of ethnic groups represented in the cultural fabric of Canada. The largest of these groups would be those coming from the British Isles and France. These two groups represent the two founding nations of Canada. However, at various times, large numbers of immigrants have arrived in Canada from other countries. In 1901, only slightly less than 10% of the Canadian population represented ethnic minority groups. These were primarily from Europe and small number of Chinese who had come to Canada to work on the railroad. The early 20th century saw a dramatic increase in the immigration of other European groups such as the Ukrainians and Germans. Following World War II, a flood of new immigrants began to stream into Canada. Over 500,000 immigrants came from Italy alone. Later in the century, a good number of non-Europeans, particularly Asians, began to arrive. Since 1979, thousands of Indo-Chinese refugees have been brought into the country both through government and private sponsorship. Although the immigrants are free to live in any part of the country, a large number seem to favor Ontario, the largest province in population. About 47% of the total population of the prairie provinces, about 35% of British Columbia, and about 29% of Ontario's population is composed of ethnic groups that are not British or French origin. The table below shows the 8 largest ethnic groups in Canada and their percentages of the total population. Use the reading and the table to help answer the following questions. Ethnic groups. The British Isles, which are English, Irish, Scottish, and Welsh, account for 40% of the population of Canada. French people account for 26% of the population of Canada. People from Germany account for 5% of the population. People from Italy account for 3% of the total population. People from the Ukraine account for 2% of the population. Native Americans account for 1.7% of the population. The people from Holland, the Dutch, account for 1.6% of the population. And the people from China account for 1.1% of the population. One thing to be aware of when you're trying to answer these questions is this table does not represent all of the different minority groups in Canada, and because of that, these numbers will not add up to 100%. That matters later on. So when it asks what percent of the total population is made up of people representing the two founding nations, you would add the British Isles and French. And then the next question asks if the total population of Canada equals 100, what percent of Canada is not British or French? You need to take 100% minus these two values. If all you do is add up these values here, you will not get the correct answer because these don't add up to 100. So again, for question C here, you need to take 100 and subtract from 100 40 plus 26, and what's left over will be the answer for number C. So that's just a tip to help you with these questions. As always, if you have any other questions, make sure you reach out and ask.